Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Red Donkey Projections. My name is Lucas, and I have Eric here.
Hey guys.
And today we'll be taking a look at the 2020 presidential forecast according to The Economist. They actually came out with this one a few days ago, or actually maybe even a week ago, and we just wanted to take a look at this because this was very interesting to see. With that being said, let's get right into it. So the first thing I think that we should point out is this little graphic they have here about the chance of them winning the Electoral College, and the chance of winning the most votes is basically the popular vote. Kind of interesting here that we see an 86% chance of winning. That is one of the higher ones, actually. JHK now has it at 80. This one is higher than JHK. Pretty interesting. Politico actually does say it's too close to call. So just keeping that in mind, this is definitely on one of the higher ones, 5 to 6 chance. That's a pretty high chance. Now, the more interesting one is the popular vote. They give Joe Biden a 97% chance of winning the popular vote. That is an A+ on the test. That's a lot, and of course, popular vote doesn't really matter. Of course, it will help. In a sense, it will help you win the electoral vote, but even if you win the most votes, it doesn't matter. Hillary Clinton, 2016, Al Gore, 2000, doesn't matter. I actually think that this might be right regarding the popular vote, because polling does show Biden leading by 8 points or so, 9 points. At the moment, it does seem pretty favorable for him to win the popular vote. Electoral vote, there is also a lean towards him as well for winning the presidency. Now we're looking at the change in time. Look at how interesting this is. In March, Trump had 275. And things have drastically changed since then. We go from Trump leading to actually by 18 electoral votes to now. That is more than 100 electoral votes. This is the biggest win since, I believe, McCain-Obama 2008. I need to double check on that. I think it is larger than 2012, but that is a pretty big win for Joe Biden if that is what happens. Pretty interesting to see. Now, I think even more interesting to see is the chance of winning. We see Biden trailing Trump by 5% to now. We see Biden leading by, that's around 60. That's a lot. Actually, more than 60.
It took like two major events to really switch how things are looking. But again, we will have to wait to see what happens in November, whether maybe people call it the October frenzy or something like that. In the matter of those 2 weeks before the election, anything can change,
Right,
But
and the first,
but this is showing very consistent results for now, and it's possible that this can carry all the way into November.
Mm-hmm. I do want to kind of elaborate on what Eric said about those two major events. The first event we can see right here was kind of when coronavirus kind of hit. Trump's approval rating went pretty down, and Biden was leading the polls. And then the second big event was when we saw it around in June, where the Black Lives Matter protests and the killing of George Floyd. Again, we see it bounce up for Joe Biden as well, leading to 86%. 86% is actually a very good chance of winning. So I think that's enough talk about the national average forecast. We're now head to the state-by-state comparison here. Just want to explain their vocabulary here. When they say something is likely, it is actually lean in our standards, because they called the second, that one likely. This one's our lean. This one is very likely is our likely, and safe is our safe. So keeping that in mind, we do agree with most of these states we have here. States on the East Coast are usually solid Democratic. States on the West Coast are usually also solid Democratic, and then we have the mid-states are usually to the Republicans. I think we should start discussing the swing states first. I think important is Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton's blue wall that came tumbling down in 2016. This is going to be very important for a Joe Biden victory. He needs to sweep these 3 states and flip these over to win this election. Of course, he has other pathways like Arizona, but if he wants kind of a secure way to win the election, he needs to flip this blue wall. This pollster does give them all 3 states a lean, as well as the state of Florida. And I think I do agree with that, because we do see a lot of these states having higher polling numbers for Joe Biden, as Joe Biden is leading in most of these states. But I do want to point out an interesting poll I saw a few days ago in the state of Michigan. Michigan shows Joe Biden up by just 1 point. That is within, I think, the tilt margin for us. That's pretty surprising to see, because most predictors put this state as likely. I do think that is a little bit too generous to the Democrats here, but that's really interesting if they're putting this as a likely, especially for a state that went to Donald Trump in 2016. Now, Wisconsin, I feel like should be a little bit smaller margin than compared to like Michigan and Pennsylvania, because Wisconsin is a more conservative area. It's more likely to go to Donald Trump, but you know what, lean is okay here. I'm kind of interested in the state of Michigan. Let's go with let's go to the state thing here. All right, and Eric, do you want to discuss kind of the stuff here, like kind of the change over time? I think that's important to take a look at.
Yeah, sure. Let's take a look. So in Michigan, it's kind of reflecting off the national average, as Lucas showed. We have Biden in March. We had Biden and Trump in the lead, and then they were at a bit of a stalemate mid-March. But then coronavirus hit the U.S., and from there, it started, becoming more and more in Biden's favor. And what helped, maybe that was what mid-April was. It was around then, maybe a bit later, that Gretchen Whitmer and Donald Trump were clashing, and that wasn't very good for both of them. But the fact is that it wasn't good for Donald Trump, so that helped Biden in that sense. And then we see in May, it was pretty steady. And then when the Floyd protests hit, Michigan being very close to Minnesota, it went up even more. So, we are probably in our own future predictions going to be putting Michigan in a bit more of a comfortable margin, but lean is, I guess it's like kind of okay.
Yeah. I think lean is the right characterization here. I do also want to point out that Michigan does have a pretty large African American electorate, so that's definitely going to be important for Biden victory as well. As I mentioned before, there were a couple of polls that did come out that showed a narrow lead for Biden than we probably expected here. We kind of did see a bit of a crash in this past one day, going from, that's not that big, but it is, in retrospect, looking at this entire thing, that's definitely a dip. Polling average does show Biden leading by, can't do math today, 6 points. That is in the likely margin. Of course, we can't always rely on polling data, but that is also very interesting to think about when considering what to put this state as. 84% chance, 5 and 6. That's a lot. 86. That's interesting. Why do they give this lean then? If it's 84. Why is it 84 and lean? I don't know. But
yeah, maybe it's just their whole overall system of classifying the probability of stuff is a bit different. So their stats are going to be a bit skewed.
Makes sense. All right. Let's now go back to the national forecast here. I think we should probably discuss. Is it necessary to discuss Florida? I think we should probably talk about Florida in depth as well. VP choice will definitely have a huge impact here. And recently, we do see a huge climb in coronavirus cases in the state of Florida.
They topped 100,000 to be exact.
Yeah, I saw that on the news. Wow, 75% chance. That's a lot. 3 and 4. Again, for a state that Donald Trump carried in 2016, this is his home state as well. 75 for Joe Biden is a huge lead. Of course, we see some changes here. When this was basically Trump's peak here in March. Mid-March, Trump was doing pretty well here. He had a pretty good shot of winning, 10% about. We see it flip completely. We see a huge jump here. In the beginning of June, George Floyd protests, and the why am I blanking? Oh, and the killing of George Floyd as well. Looking down here, polling does show another dip for Joe Biden. Interesting. I'm not too sure why, because I feel like polling for Biden might go up a little bit because of the coronavirus. If there's a larger amount of coronavirus in Florida, because the governor is Ron DeSantis, who is a pretty a big supporter of Donald Trump. Pretty interesting. He's a Republican governor of Florida, elected in 2018. 3 and 4 is a lot. That's very interesting. I did not expect to really go down that much. Now, heading back to the national forecast here, let's see. So, let's see. What else is important to talk about? Oh, interesting. They didn't put Indiana as solid. Huh. Interesting. Neither did put Missouri or Mississippi.
Are we gonna talk about the toss-ups now, or we're still gonna cover some of the colored
Yeah, I
states?
think we should probably discuss the toss-ups now. Interesting. Texas.
Honestly, there are quite a few that we usually don't put as toss-up.
Let's start with the most surprising one here. That is Georgia. Georgia, personally, I don't think it's a toss-up. I think it will go to Donald Trump, either between a lean or a tilt. Obviously, I am leaning more towards lean on this one. Let's click in on the individual state here. Just for some background again, Georgia does have a pretty large African-American electorate here. Wow, 1 in 2. Okay, that is interesting. That is what? That is about less than, no, that's 12%. I can't do math, really, I can't. But look at this change. March, we see Donald Trump, 90%.
90%, wow. And then
Sudden
it just...
But then we see it shoot up
declined.
again. This is interesting. Again, we see it shoot up. Wow. So at Joe Biden's peak, 53 to 47. Again, I don't think this will go to Joe Biden. It's a pretty low chance here.
Yeah.
But again, this is really interesting to take a look at. Wow.
Maybe the reason why it did dip was because when people realized that Stacey Abrams, who's from Georgia, didn't end up on the final 3 pick, I think at that point people just kind of gave up on the fact that Biden had some sort of chance. So maybe that's why it dipped
possible.
a little.
I think we should probably discuss that in a future video, the top 3 VPs. But Georgia's an interesting one. I think another interesting one was Arizona. 2 in 3 chance for Joe Biden. That's a lot, 62%. That is a 24% lead. That's a pretty significant lead for a chance to win. Very interesting here.
Yeah.
Arizona does have a pretty high Hispanic electorate. We could see a lot of those Hispanics coming out to vote. When turnout is higher, the Democrats do usually favor that. Because Arizona is kind of this new kind of battleground state. We didn't really see this before. In 2016, Hillary Clinton lost by 3 points. That is pretty slim compared to in 2012, 9 points for Governor Mitt Romney, or now Senator. We look at this change. Again, we see them cross in about April. This is where Trump's handling of coronavirus was considered to be pretty poor. Before that, we had Donald Trump leading by a lot. That is more than 50%, 78 to 22. That's a lot. And then we see that cross again. And now it's 62 to 38. So very interesting. We kind of see that with the popular count too. He currently leads by 3% about 3%. That is a lean margin. If this is a forecasted popular vote here. Two-party popular vote. Okay. Well, that is very interesting, to say the least. I do think Arizona does favor Joe Biden. I do think Arizona probably will go Joe Biden in November. Let's now head to Ohio. Ohio was another one that we were kind of surprised about. We're a toss-up here. This one's only 55 to 45. Interesting. We also do think that Ohio does kind of favor Donald Trump here. Eric, do you want to talk about Ohio?
So although it did come down, you see the graph here, there was a very big divide here. 83 approximately to 17, a bit more actually. And then as we move on, it's starting to get a bit the margins are getting slimmer, and it gets really slim these past few weeks. We did a polling video a few weeks ago, and at that point, Joe Biden was up by 1 point. We were finalizing our data, and I told and I just wanted to double check Ohio, and Biden was leading there. So that was
Yeah.
very interesting to point out. And also just due to other just general circumstances with coronavirus and maybe possibly it being impacted by the Black Lives Matter movement, that is also making this margin slimmer too. Although Donald Trump still does have the majority, and it's
Whoa,
we feel
50-50.
yeah, it's a very interesting poll, but we still do think that Ohio will go to Donald Trump, but just in a lot less of a margin than we first thought.
Okay, wow. You know what? I think that we can characterize the state again as a lean. Usually we did say likely. I think at this point it is a lean now because of course we cannot rely solely on polling data, but polling data is a pretty key indicator here. And if Biden's leading, I think it's probably a lean or a tilt. This is really interesting to see. Now I think the last one that we should take a look at here is probably the state of North Carolina. In this video, we did focus a little bit more on the toss-up states than the blue wall states that kind of lean towards Biden. We'll probably talk about those later in a separate video. North Carolina, just some background. There are a lot of there's a huge African American electorate here. We saw protests in the city of Charlotte, which is the biggest city in North Carolina. There was a lot of African Americans coming out to show their kind of support for the Black Lives Matter movement. And with North Carolina, we also have a Democratic governor there, Governor Roy Cooper. So this state went to Barack Obama in 2008. We do think that this is a pure toss-up. If we had to give it a winner, I think it would probably swing to Joe Biden. Again, because of that African-American electorate here, we initially saw Trump leading here in the 60s. We saw a dip. This was during the coronavirus. Obviously we're still under the coronavirus right now, but that's kind of where people really thought he was poorly handling it. And then we see it rise again towards the end here. Beginning of June, we see that happen. We see Biden leading now by 10%, which is actually a pretty decent amount. Okay, that is very slim. That is a tilt D. So yeah, I do think that North Carolina does have a pretty, I don't know how to say this, but I think it can go either way. Joe Biden does have a realistic shot of winning the state at this point. Actually, I said this was the last one, but I do think I want to take a look at Texas, just to check it out. Texas. Oops, I hit the wrong button there. Hold on, let me hit the Texas. Texas is traditionally a very conservative Republican state. Hasn't went to a Democrat in a while. However, it has been becoming more Democratic. There's a pretty good amount of the Hispanic electorate here. 77 to 23. Okay. Again, I don't know how they're predicting this because 77 to 23 is, I think that's a safe bar. But anyways, in our opinions, we don't think that Texas is safe far. We think it's a little bit narrower. I think it's a lean likely. If anything, I think it's actually really hard to tell.
Yeah.
Leading by 3 and 4. So this one is larger than some of the other states we took a look at. I don't think that Texas is competitive in 2020. I think that Texas will be competitive in 2024. It's definitely becoming more and more purple. That's for sure. 48 to 51. That's a lean. Actually, the funny thing is that polling in about last summer, Biden was leading here by 2 points, which is interesting. Looking at this change, we actually didn't see that much change. We obviously did see a dip for Donald Trump, but this is a pretty consistent one compared to the other ones. But we did see him fall from 93% to 77%. At his lowest point, it was 75-25. So again, we did see, because of these two events, changes. That's definitely true. And I think that's it for this episode. So overall, I do think we agree with most of this map.
Yeah.
So we did see some surprises, but other than that, I do think this map is fairly reasonable here. Should we give this map a rating, Eric? I know we said we were going to do it on future maps, but we totally forgot. I think we should.
Was it out of 10?
Out of 10. What do you think? 1 to 10.
Well, as you said, a lot of this makes sense. I'm just giving a final scan, and coasts are fine. Middle of the country is fine. Other than the few surprises of like Ohio and Georgia, I'd probably give it like an 8.5 out of 10. It's fairly reasonable given the circumstances that are going on. Except Georgia, that's a bit too generous to the Democrats. And we do think Ohio is also going to Donald Trump, but just in a bit of a smaller margin. So 8.5 is, I feel like that's pretty reasonable for this map.
Yeah, I agree with those two criticisms. I also do think that Arizona will probably go to Joe Biden. I think it should be a lean D. In our projections, we say it's a tilt D. They don't have a tilt here, but in my opinion, it is lean. But other than that, that does seem pretty solid. So with that being said, I think I also give it a 8.5. That definitely makes sense. And that's our video for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this episode, please hit the like button. And if you like our content, please subscribe. We'll see you in our next episode tomorrow.
See ya.
Oh, I forgot one more point, but thank you all so much for 300 subscribers. We are thinking of doing a 300 subscriber special. We don't know yet what we're going to do. We are considering having a sub-decided election. We'll let you know what our decision is by tomorrow's episode probably, but I think we are going to have a sub-decided election. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for watching.
We're going to say the see ya again. See ya.